Hello YouTube, and welcome to my channel. This is the start of a new series where we examine paradoxes in philosophy. Today we're going to look at a logical paradox called Hempel's ravens. This paradox suggests a contradiction between what is logical and what is intuitive. It's called Hempel's ravens because it was first proposed by the logician Carl Gustav Hempel, and he did it with an example about ravens, which will be the same example we will be using today. Now this video will seem like we're doing magic with words and numbers, but by the end, you too can study ravens without leaving your house. Now before we get started, I want to get some terminology out of the way. First, let's talk about propositions. For our purposes, a proposition is any sentence or statement that can be assigned a truth value. Truth value simply means whether a proposition is true or false. For example, we would say that the proposition ducks are birds is true, whereas the statement antelopes are houses is false. Now this may have seemed obvious, but it's about to get a little trickier. Both of those propositions, ducks are birds and antelopes are houses, can be represented by the same statement in symbolic logic. P, therefore Q. What that means is that any and all members of group P are members of group Q. In the case of ducks are birds, P, therefore Q, is true, whereas in the case of antelopes are houses, P, therefore Q, is false. P, therefore Q is what we call a conditional statement. Having transformed the statements into this symbolic form, we can create a truth table for those statements, like so. This truth table represents the various conditions under which a given object would either provide evidence for the statement P, therefore Q, or disprove it. For example, if we had a duck and it was a bird, it would fall under the first row. It is a duck, so P is true. It is a bird, so Q is true. And logically, therefore, P therefore Q is true. Now, imagine we found a duck that wasn't a bird. In that case, P would be true, but Q would be false. If we were to find such a duck, then P therefore Q would be false in this instance. Now let's imagine we examined something that wasn't a duck. This would put it in the third or fourth category depending on whether it is a bird. Whether or not whatever we were examining is a bird or not, though, examining a non-duck couldn't disprove that ducks are birds. Therefore, we would say that it's evidence that the proposition is true. Now this might seem strange. Why should we say ducks are birds is true based on the examination of something that isn't a duck? Wouldn't it be better to say that the evidence is inconclusive? Well, the answer to that question is going to lay the groundwork for the paradox we are about to examine. In formal logic, a proposition can be transformed in various ways that preserve their truth value. One of those ways is what's called a contraposition, or taking the contrapositive of the proposition. To take the contraposition, you negate both P and Q and reverse them. So for example, ducks are birds becomes non-birds are not ducks, or in formal logic, not Q, therefore not P. This statement is logically equivalent to ducks are birds, meaning that any circumstance under which one of them is true, the other one is going to be true as well. Similarly, when one of them is false, the other one is going to be false as well. Now let's use the contrapositive to examine our non-duck. If our non-duck is also not a bird, then it demonstrates that non-birds are not ducks, and therefore that ducks are birds. It would fit under the fourth row. On the other hand, if it isn't a duck and it is a bird, that is, it falls in the third row of our truth tables, we can use a second transformation to show that it is true, not P or Q, which in this case means things are either non-ducks or birds or both. Our non-duck bird is clearly evidence that this statement is true, and because this statement is logically equivalent to ducks are birds, it follows that our non-duck bird is evidence for the statement that ducks are birds. Now if you feel a little lost, feel free to pause the video on the shot of the truth table and play around with different propositions that follow the formula all x are y. They can be obvious things like ducks are birds or nonsense ones like antelopes are houses. Either way, if you play around with them, you should be able to understand how or why these different transformations are logically equivalent. Now, on to Hempel's paradox. Let's take the statement, all ravens are black. Now, if we wanted to find evidence for the statement or evidence against it, how would we do so? Presumably, we'd go outside, try to find some ravens, and check to see if they were black or not. A black raven would seem to provide some evidence for the statement all ravens are black. A non-black raven would disprove it. But you know, going outside is rough. It's hot, and ravens are hard to find, and they move around too much to catch them. What if there was an easier way? Well, according to what we said before, all ravens are black is logically equivalent to all non-black things are non-ravens. So instead of going outside and looking for ravens, we can sit inside and find anything that's not black, check to see whether it's a raven or not, and if it isn't, say that we found evidence that all ravens are black. So next to me, I have a blue coffee cup. This is a non-black thing, and upon further inspection, my coffee cup is not a raven. Therefore, it is evidence for the statement all non-black things are non-ravens. And because that statement is logically equivalent to all ravens are black, my blue coffee cup is evidence that all ravens are black. Isn't this much better than going outside? And my house is full of non-black things, and each of those non-black things provides more and more evidence that all ravens are black. I could get dozens of pieces of evidence for the proposition all ravens are black without ever leaving my house. Now, if you're doubting whether this is true, we can mathematically prove this. Unfortunately, our world is really big, and it's hard to assign probabilities on the scale of something like our world. So let's make a hypothetical example. Let's pretend we are examining a world in which there are only two things. Let's represent them with boxes. So there are only two items or objects in this world. What else do we know about this world? Well, let's also say that we know the world is wholly comprised of ravens or coffee cups. So this world is either made up of two ravens, two coffee cups, or one of each. Further, there are only three possible colors, so whatever the two things in these boxes are, we know that they are black, red, or blue. This would give us probabilities that look something like this. Because there are 6 possibilities for each square, there's approximately a 16.6% chance for each possible combination of raven or coffee cup with one of our 3 colors in that square. There's also a 2.7% chance for any possible 2-item combination in this world, because 6 times 6 equals 36, so there are 36 possible combinations, and 100 divided by 36 equals 2.7%. Now, 20 of those 36 options would include at least one red or blue raven, which means that we know there's about a 55.5% chance that it's false that all ravens are black. That means there's approximately a 44.4% chance that all ravens are black is true. Now, if it's true that a non-black non-raven is evidence for the statement that all ravens are black, we would expect that the probability of the statement being true increases and the probability of it being false decreases if the first box is revealed to be a non-black non-raven. And in fact, that's what we see. Given that the first box is a red or blue coffee cup, that means that there's only a 33.3% chance, or 1/3, that the second box would include a blue or red raven, and a 2/3 chance that it contains a coffee cup or black raven. This means that looking at a non-black non-raven decreased the possibility of all ravens are black being false by almost half, and increased the possibility of it being true by exactly half. So it's clear that my blue coffee cup is evidence that all ravens are black. But looking at this, you might still be skeptical. After all, 3 of the 4 combinations that would seemingly prove that all ravens are black in this world wouldn't have any ravens in them at all. Can we really say in a world without ravens that it's true that all ravens are black? Well, according to formal logic, we can. Remember that according to the transformations before, all ravens are black is logically equivalent to all non-black things are non-ravens, and everything is either a non-raven or black or both. A hypothetical world composed only of coffee cups would show both of these propositions to be true, and therefore it must also be true that in our ravenless universe, all ravens are black. But even if that were not the case, we could show Hempel's paradox holds even when we stipulate that the world has at least one raven in it. Take the hypothetical world we constructed and add that stipulation, If it's the case in this universe that there is at least one raven, then 9 out of the 36 possible combinations are taken out because they only have 2 coffee cups. That leaves us with 27 possible combinations, and 20 of those include a non-black raven. So there's about a 74.1% chance that all ravens are black is false, and only a 25.9% chance that it's true. But if the first square reveals a non-black coffee cup, we know that the second square has to be a raven of some color, and because there are only 3 colors, we know that there's a 1 in 3 chance, or 33.3% chance, that the raven is black. Thus, finding a non-black coffee cup increased the probability of all ravens are black being true from 25.9% to 33.3%. So how do we resolve this paradox? Well, there are a couple ways. Perhaps the most intuitive is the standard Bayesian solution, which accepts the paradox but points out that the evidence for all ravens are black provided by a blue coffee cup is minimal. According to this resolution, the conclusion appears paradoxical because we intuitively estimate the amount of evidence provided by the observation of a non-black non-raven to be 0 when it is in fact non-zero, but extremely small. Now this solution works in some circumstances. For example, in our hypothetical world where we know that there is at least one raven in the world, observing a red coffee cup, like we said, increases the probability of the statement being true from roughly 25% to 33%, so roughly an 8% increase. But had we observed a black raven, then the increase would have been from 25% to almost 67%. So observing a red coffee cup only provides about 1/5 as much evidence for the statement all ravens are black than observing a black raven. However, this is not the case in the same world without that stipulation. If we accept that all ravens are black is true in a world without ravens, as formal logic dictates we should, then the Bayesian resolution doesn't hold. Observing a red coffee cup and a black raven gives us exactly the same information regarding the statement all ravens are black. Another option is to point out that what the paradox relies upon is the existence of a large number of non-black non-ravens, and that inferences drawn from this information about the blackness of ravens can also be evidence against the blackness of ravens. For example, in our hypothetical world, we showed that observing a blue coffee cup raises the probability of all ravens being black. However, the same argument can be made to show that a blue coffee cup raises the probability of all ravens being red. Now the statements all ravens are black and all ravens are red are mutually contradictory. So how can it be the case that the same evidence makes it more likely for both to be true? This suggests that the explanatory power of non-ravens to tell us about the colors of ravens relies significantly on the fact that discovering a non-raven reduces the possibility of ravens existing in the first place, and if ravens don't exist, then no statement about them can be empirically proven false. This was the argument of logician Irving John Good. Good provided the following thought experiment. Imagine an infinitely intelligent newborn baby having built-in neural circuits enabling him to deal with formal logic, English syntax, and subjective probability. He might now argue, after defining a raven in detail, that it is extremely unlikely that there are any ravens, and therefore it is extremely likely that all ravens are black is true. On the other hand, he goes on to argue, if there are ravens, then there is a reasonable chance that they are a variety of colors. Therefore, if I were to discover that even a black raven exists, I would consider it to be less probable that all ravens are black than I did initially. In other words, if we don't know that ravens exist, then it is probable that all ravens are black can't be proven false because there are a significant number of hypothetical worlds where ravens don't exist. However, if we then discover that ravens do exist, even if it is by observation of a black raven, then the probability of all ravens are black goes down. Good gave us another thought experiment to show this with, which I'm going to modify for simplicity. Let's imagine that we know we are in one of 2 possible worlds. Both worlds have 100 objects in them. In one of these worlds there are 98 black ravens, 1 blue raven, and a red herring. In the other world, there is 1 black raven and 99 red herrings. If the first box we open has a black raven in it, we can be very sure that in the world we are in, all ravens are black is false. That's because the probability that we found the one black raven in the world where everything is a black raven or a red herring is much smaller than the probability that we found one of the 98 black ravens in the world that also includes a blue raven. So given certain background information, a black raven can actually be evidence against the statement that all ravens are black. So what's the takeaway from all this? Does Hempel's paradox hold? There are a lot of good reasons to think it does, but apparently equally strong reasons to think it can be resolved. Ultimately, what it does show is that there is significant reason to question some of the assumptions we have about what constitutes evidence for various propositions. As true as our intuitions may sometimes appear to be, they don't always see the bigger picture. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can see more by subscribing. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so on Patreon. The link is in the description. Until next time, I'm Benedict the 17th. Go with God.